Slow down, lay your burden down.
Hey, welcome to episode number 45 of Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. I am the host, Dan Dunford, and had something interesting happen last Monday. I don't know if you listened to every episode or most episodes, you may or may not have noticed that there was no episode last week, which was not planned. I was very proud of the fact that I hadn't missed any Mondays since I started the show back in last August. But this time, didn't really have a choice. Broke the screen on my computer, wasn't able to use it, had to get it fixed. So, didn't have, never thought I really would need a backup plan for that. So yeah, there was no episode last week. But in some ways, it makes my life a little bit easier as far as my production schedule. Shouldn't be missing any more Mondays though. So this week, I had brought in my friend Emilio Guarino, who is a string bass player based out of New Jersey. New York area. Really, really wonderful bass player. But in addition to that, he recently wrote a book entitled Make It, a guide for recent music graduates. And so he reached out to me a while ago, and we were kind of talked back and forth a little bit here and there. We were finally able to get together for an interview to talk about the book, to talk about his career and like why he was, even into wanting to write a book, about kind of dealing with what it is that us freelancers deal with. So I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you want to take a look at what he's doing or purchase the book, you can go to his website, emilioguarino.com. That's EMILIOGUARINO.com. At the top of his website, there's a little button that says Make It. You can click on that and you can purchase the book. Right now it's only in digital format, with plans for physical copies later in the year. We talk a little bit about that in the production plan. Emilio's a great, interesting guy. Is really thoughtful. Has thought very carefully about a lot of this stuff. And has a lot of really good things to say. If you go to his website and you click on Make It, you can check out excerpts from the book. And if you want to get a copy for yourself, when you go to buy it, if you enter in the code Divergent Paths, you can get 20% off. So do that if you're interested. But you should buy it if you're in that target demo or know someone who is in that target demo who could use maybe a little bit of a helping hand, or just some encouragement in how to do things maybe. If you like the episode, as always, subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. It's really helpful for me to get feedback about different episodes, particularly on iTunes. For some reason, they like it when things get reviewed. So, only with good reviews, of course. Who needs a bad review? Go do something else if you hate the podcast so much. Also, hop on to Facebook and click the like button. Facebook.com/Divergent Paths Pod. Or you can also listen to the podcast on Google Play and my website, which is dandunfordtrombone.com. And if you like the podcast a lot, you can throw me a few dollars to help keep it going, so I can, things like, my computer break, I can afford to get them fixed. Those are not expensive. I mean, those are expensive. Those are not cheap. That's what I was going to say. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Slow down.
Thanks for making the trip up here.
Totally, yeah.
To hang out and talk around about music and stuff. So you recently finished self-published
Yeah.
a book
I self-published a book.
called Make It.
Make It.
Make It. Yes, sounds great. But that's, you're not like an author only. This is something that comes out of you being a freelance musician in your own right, and
Yeah.
doing, which is kind of,
Yeah.
kind of how it goes. Like, well, with musicians who have written books, it usually comes from their career. But a lot of the guys who've done this are a lot of musicians who write books comes after like a 40-year career of playing in an orchestra or being a soloist.
And that's cool too.
No, I'm not.
That's a great thing to do.
Absolutely. Like, well, yeah, people are always, people with great stories should tell their stories. In a community of younger musicians and a completely different world than a book about someone's experiences after 40 years of being a soloist or a concert pianist or a conductor might not be as helpful to a 24-year-old musician who just finished their performance diploma and is like, well, so I was taught how to do this stuff for the past 8 years, and now what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the inspirations behind the whole project of putting a book like that together. Because, like, you check out these books that people write or that are written about them, when they're very, very deep into their careers, they're very mature as performers. And yeah, like I said, those are stories that need to be told. But I noticed that there's kind of a gap, basically, where there's like a lot of information about like coming from these super mature players who have been around for a long time and, kind of been there, done that with everything. And then when you're in college, that they're good about loading you up full of information as far as like the technical aspects of the craft. But yeah, like some of it comes from my own frustrations, because like I remember being, 22, 23 when I had just finished up at Rutgers for my first music degree. Right? I went to music school twice. Yeah, I remember being like in my early 20s coming out of Rutgers. I went back to school for a master's after that, but when I graduated music school the first time, I remember just looking around trying to figure out how to put it together. Like, what are the seeds of a career? How do you get going? How do you start meeting people? How do you find your first couple gigs? And how do you start to build momentum? And I couldn't really find it. There weren't a lot of resources. And what ended up happening is I just talked to a lot of people. I was always just that like annoying kid, like, hey, how you doing that? Like I'd go and, go to people's gigs and hang with them on the breaks or catch them after the show, whatever. Just ask questions, experiment, see what worked for me, what didn't work for me, talk to my friends that I graduated with, see what was working for them, and like, okay. And then, it got a little bit better, and then I went back to music school and was deep into the school thing again and really focused on that, which I think was a good move. I certainly needed it for certain, just to clean up certain things in my playing, because I started really late. But again, like, I'd say like about halfway through graduate school, then that's where I was really like, okay, like, how are we gonna put this together? Like, where are you going, kid? Like,
well, it's the path to traditional musical success is very well documented.
Yeah,
and this is kind of what we're talking about here. And that's usually, when you're in school, that's usually what is held up as the way to a successful career. Both, and there's nothing, like, I'm not trying to shit on that at all. Because that has been the way to really real success. You go to school, you learn your excerpts, you do your thing, you do your audition circuit, you win a job in a smaller orchestra, and then you work your way up to a slightly better orchestra, and then hopefully, you can cobble together a career where you're playing in an orchestra, you're teaching, you're playing some chamber music on the side, and that's fine. But like, there's always existed this other career, particularly in New York or in the New York region. There's always been like a freelance element.
Yeah.
The problem is like, the guys who are kind of the gods of those scenes, you might not even know their names. Like, there's guys who have recorded on literally hundreds of things and been really successful.
Yeah.
But you might not even know who the hell they are, because there's like a weird. I found this by talking to some of the older guys that I play with occasionally, and they might talk about who they've played with, but they don't really talk about how they did it. And of course, the community is very different than it was. There's just more people now than there were back then. But like, there's not as much, with a few exceptions. These guys, they do their thing for their, they do their career. They have their 30 to 40 years sometimes. Then they retire and they move in New York. They'll move to upstate. And they'll still come down and play occasionally, but they're done. They did their thing, and now they're done. And there's no record of, other than these like dozens and dozens of recordings where they were a studio musician or a freelance guy, or like recollections of different big bands or whatever. There's no real record of like how they did what they did or why. It's just they did their thing, and then they took their money and they went.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so it's kind of, that's a broad generalization. Like, there's like differences. I'm speaking in broad generalities here. But now, how am I supposed to know how so and so trombonist did it for 40 years? Like, how did he succeed?
Right.
I don't know. He's living in Westchester somewhere with his kids and his wife, or his grandkids maybe now. Who knows? Like, how am I supposed to talk to him?
Even some of those guys, like if you go and talk to them and pick their brain about, how they did it, the way things came together in the 60s or the 70s when they were coming out of school and making a name for themselves, a lot of things were different back then. And then, I mean, also to back up and go back to what you were saying a little bit about how like music school works, where they give you these like couple buckets of like, okay, these are like your options if you're going to be quote unquote successful.
And here are the tools that have been traditionally used.
Yeah, well, because it's like you look at the whole curriculum at most music schools. Like if you go for a classical performance degree, the whole curriculum is basically designed around how to get you in shape to go play in an orchestra. That's what the whole thing is designed around.
And there are a few schools that have started, you have places with new music programs. You have places starting to kind of push students in a different direction by offering classes that maybe prepare you a little bit better or give you options at least with it. But even then, there's pushback from these faculty members who have been here for a long time.
Yeah, like I said, I don't really agree with the idea even that music school is supposed to be this trade school where you go and you learn the trade of playing in an orchestra, and then you graduate, and then the only legitimate path to success is that. Right? I think, because then, like I said, you're not, because if you look at it that way, then you're not really getting an education. You're just getting like kind of glorified job training for a job that doesn't have a lot of openings right now. You know, like,
and if you're one of the people who not, I mean, there is some luck involved, but a lot of hard work and luck. That's anything. And if you're one of the people who gets one of those few job openings at a young age, that's fantastic. And
cool. Like, if that's your thing, like
fucking
awesome.
Great, you did it.
Yeah.
What about the other 119 people who were at that audition? You know?
Yeah. No, that's one of the things. Like, because I had some like okay luck with that kind of thing as far as getting my name into sub with some of these groups, and then I had this thing happen over in Lucerne, which was a whole other can of worms, but maybe we'll get to that later. I remember going to some of these auditions, and there was one in particular, I won't say what orchestra it was for, but I went up and I knew most of the people auditioning. Because it was near where I went to school, and there was just a lot of people in the room that I knew from wherever. Yeah. So usually you go into these auditions and you're like not feeling great. You're like a little bit like on edge, and like you're not super. You have to sort of fight to get comfortable enough to play well. Yeah. And everyone has their rituals that they use for that. But this wasn't like that. I went in and I was like, oh, my buddies are all here, and I immediately was like more at ease, and I'm talking to people like, oh yeah, we'll get falafel after this, it'll be awesome. So it was just like super chill. And then also in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, man, like there's like 15 people here who are just badasses. Like, man, like any one of them could take this job and just kill it. Like, they would be great. So then we all go in and play, and we're sitting there waiting for the proctor to come out and tell us the results.
Number this, number that.
Yeah, and I think there was like, forget what, there was like 15 or 20 people there, and I think they wanted to hear 2 or 3 of them again for the next round. And I was like, it just put a bad taste. I was like, I just put a bad taste in my mouth, because I was like, man, like so many of these people are such wonderful musicians. I know they're up to the task. Like, I've played with them, I've done gigs with them, I was in school with some of them, they're personal friends. Like, so I was like, man, like that was kind of a waste of time. like we're all, like, one person is gonna go and get like a little job out of this that pays, a portion of their income for the year. Yeah. And then everybody else is gonna go home and go, oh, okay, now what? Like,
well, wait, let me check. When's the next one?
So that's why I'm not really down with this whole idea that music school is trade school, that it's job. And I feel this way about a lot of professions, actually. Like, people like to get up and complain and say, oh, well, school doesn't prepare you for the real world. And I don't think it's really supposed to. If it's an education, like a true education, not glorified job training, if it's an education, it's going to teach you to go out and get or what you need to make your next career move, or how to teach yourself the skill you're going to need for whatever it is you want to do. I think that's what an education should aim to do, is like teach you how to just think about stuff.
It's just over the last 30 years in America, I guess. Yeah. There's been there's the shift, because for decades, if the majority of the population didn't get college educations, and if you had a college just a 4-year degree, that was a big deal. And that would open up doors that you wouldn't be able to go through otherwise. But now, I mean, it's weird within a large portion of the country. It's weird. It's unusual if you run into someone from all the suburban neighborhoods across the country. Yeah. It's weird if you run into someone who doesn't go to college, hasn't gone to college, even people from like backgrounds that might not be as successful. So like when everyone has a college degree, no one has a college degree in a weird way. Like,
Yeah.
so it becomes less about like, oh, this will get me a job, as opposed to, so this is supposed to teach me, like what you're saying, teach me how to think about how to, like, what move to make next in order to create your own path. It's just like a way it's a different approach.
When less people had college degrees, of course it meant a little bit more, because you had this institution basically stamping themselves on you and saying like, yeah, this person is smart, they show up on time, they know how to follow instructions, they're going to be a good worker and all that stuff. But yeah, now so many people have that stamp from some institution somewhere.
There's only a handful of schools where it's been documented that it has an actual effect on like the probability of getting a really well-paying job. There's like a handful of them.
Yeah. I mean, and this is something I've thought a lot about, because in my family, there's me. I have a bachelor's degree in music and a master's degree. And then my younger brother, who's only a year younger than me, didn't go to college at all. Mm-hmm. He went to trade school. He went to go study, he learned how to fix cars. He was a mechanic for a little while, and then realized he didn't want to turn wrenches for the rest of his life, making, $22 an hour, because it's really hard work, really thankless work. Nobody goes to the mechanic with their car when it's busted, and then the mechanic comes out and says like, oh yeah, it's going to be $800. Like, nobody's happy about that.
No one's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, you fixed my car, now I can drive it places.
It's like
fuck you, it's $800.
Yeah,
what are you doing? Like, giving it a hand job?
Yeah. Nobody is going to go in and just be happy to get that message. But that's what he was doing all day. Mm-hmm. And at a very young age, he hit the ceiling on how much money he was going to make in that profession, unless, he opened his own shop or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then he decided like, okay, I'm going to, if the only real money in this is if I open my own operation, like, let me just get into another business. So that's what he ended up doing. And he had a couple ventures that went pretty well. Mm-hmm. But he never really, one of the things that always impressed me about him was he never really relied on like having the degree to open the door for him. He was just, no, I got to figure that one out myself. Mm-hmm. It was all on him. And I feel the same way. Like, for neither of these degrees did I go in and think like, oh, well, this is going to, this master's degree is really going to open it up for me. No.
There's this weird balance, and like, there's been so much written about it over the past several years about like the quote unquote millennial generation. And, like, there's people who write that, millennials are the most entitled generation that we've ever seen. They expect to be handed this because they a lot of them grew up in, in decently set up families who, never really had to struggle when they were growing up. And then there's the other side that says, well, that might be true, but the job market is also more locked up than it's ever been. So there's like this thing where people are saying, well, they should just have to work harder. And then there's the other side being like, well, they can work harder, but there's nowhere for them to go. And
no, that's that whole.
It's like it's this whole back and forth. And what it comes down to is like whether or not our generation is entitled or not. There are fewer opportunities in most professions, and you kind of have to figure, like you said, like you're using your brother as an example. You have to figure it out for yourself, no matter what. Like, you have, whether you have a degree, whether you don't have a degree, whether you have a bachelor's and a master's, whether you have a bachelor, 2 masters and a doctorate, whether you only have whatever you have. It's gotten more and more that no matter what your education level is, you have to figure it out for yourself anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a big theme that I come back to over and over and over again in my book and just in my own life. Mm-hmm. That's why I put it in the book. Yeah. The whole book is just like, okay, like 3 years out of grad school, I'm doing okay. I'm playing all the time. I'm making a living at it. Like, here's all the stuff I know that worked for me or worked for somebody, that's close to me, a friend, whatever, personal colleague. So I'm big on that. In the book, I call it personal accountability.
Yeah.
It's like you're not allowed to get out of school and be like, oh, well, they didn't teach me to do that in school. It's like, no. Like you didn't learn to do that. That's you. Like, if you think it's something you need to know, you need to go out and get it. Mm-hmm. And like to talk about like millennial entitlement. That's one of those things. It's one of those premises that I don't really buy into, because you got one group of people saying, "Oh, these millennials, they're so entitled," and I'm saying, whoa. Why is it weird that this generation of people wants to do a little bit better than their parents?
Because that's what
my parents wanted.
Yeah,
right?
that's how the generations have always worked in America. You work so your kids can have it a little bit better, and the kids, on the other hand, are saying, well, my parents did this, and I want to do a little bit better. I mean, it's just the way you do that is different than it was in 1965 or 1955 or
and
whatever.
It's like, there's always going to be entitled people, but if you wake up in the morning and know that, like, okay, I'm hustling to try and get what I want, and I'm working hard at this, then you're like, okay, I'm not one of those entitled people. Then you could honestly say to yourself, like, okay, that argument doesn't apply to me because I'm doing X, Y, and Z to try and further myself.
Yeah.
Now, if you're doing, like I said before, if you're doing actionable things, like if you sit there and just complain about stuff, like that's not really doing anything. It's like, but if you can say, like, okay, I am doing these things every day to try and get closer to what I want, then, like, so what if people think you're an entitled millennial? You're not. Like, so a lot of these, like, sort of broad generalizations that people make about this generation, or I hear that and it's like, man, you're reading The Atlantic too much. Like, like come on, just look at what you got. Look, like, one of the things I talk about in the book is to just take inventory of everything you have. Because a lot of people, like, I fall victim to this a lot, is I get frustrated and think, like, man, I'm here, but I wish I was here, and it's like, this isn't working, how am I going to do it? But it's like, whoa, like, just back up a step and look at everything you have. Like, I was born into a country that's relatively safe, right? I can go out on the street and I'm not worried about, like, somebody dropping bombs on me. I'm not, like, I have a basic level of safety on a day-to-day basis that I can count on. A lot of people in the world do not have that. Right? I'm not worried about, like, where my next meal is coming from. I mean, there were days where my next meal was, like, definitely going to be top ramen, but, like, at the least I was like, okay, I'm going to get a hot meal myself by the end of the day. Thankfully now I'm doing a little bit better than top ramen for dinner.
Now you've upgraded to hot dogs.
No, but
but I
you know what I mean? It's like, okay, like, even, like, when I was in grad school and had, like, no money and was really struggling.
You're still pretty.
It was, like, still pretty good. Like, I had an internet connection. I had a cell phone.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's a healthy thing to just step back and look at everything you have. Like, in my case, I got really lucky to come from a family of pretty intelligent, educated people. Not many musicians or artistic types. There's a lot of, like, engineers and scientists, those types. But at the end of the day, it's still a really amazing group of people to grow up around. And they, they have interesting thoughts on things. And, so I think that's a big thing, is before you get on the complaint train too much, like, just look at what you got and say, like, okay, I have all this stuff in my corner. Like, there has to be something I can do that I'm just not seeing right now if I'm frustrated.
Yeah. And, it's easy, yeah. And I've been talking with people a lot about this. Is when you're like you're saying, you're I'm doing this, but I'd rather be doing this,
right?
Which is not a bad place to be. I mean, from a career standpoint, that's not a bad place to be, because you always do want to be pushing yourself to the next thing, pushing yourself to be better.
Be better, yeah.
Like, I mean, if I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm only doing what's before X, Y, Z, T, U, and V, whatever.
I would have had to sing the alphabet song. To
Yeah,
remember that.
I don't think I got that right, but I left out W. But if you're not to that point yet, well, then you figure out it's good to be pushing towards that thing that might pay better, that might give you like be what you've always wanted to do. But you can't let the fact that you're not there yet like drive you into the ground as far as where you are now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, hey, if you're making money and paying your rent as a musician, like I've brought this up in a lot of my most recent interviews because I've been thinking about it so much recently, is that when I was 15, 16, and I decided I want to be a musician, like a professional musician when I was 12, right?
Okay.
Which is pretty young. But I started trombone early, and I had a lot of really good teachers really early, which is a little bit unusual.
Yeah.
Like, so I had private lessons all through high school, so like around 15 or 16, sure, like I was in a position where I was still in a position where I was like, oh, orchestral was pretty much the only way to go. And sure, maybe like I don't know how I would ever do freelance. I didn't know I was going to move to New York. I was living in Florida. I just assumed that I would go do my 6 years of school and then audition and work whatever odd jobs, and then I would win my audition, and then I would be set. Like thousands of people think. Like the narrative
that you're taught.
The narrative.
Right.
I was like slightly off that path because I had been introduced to guys like the music of guys like Dave Taylor, and I had a teacher who kind of let me explore whatever I wanted instead of keeping me, but I still had that thing. So if 16-year-old me could look at 26-year-old me and see that 26-year-old me is a professional musician who doesn't have to have another job, he would be really stoked. Sure, I'm not. Well, I mean, I'm not.
I think about the same thing.
I'm not
all the
playing
time.
in the. I never pictured myself in one of the top, the big five orchestras, quote unquote, in the U.S. But I'm not the bass trombonist of the San Antonio Symphony or the Seattle Symphony or the Atlanta Symphony, whatever more mid-tier orchestra. I'm not. But you know what? And I don't have the benefits that go with that. But you know what? I do okay. I do pretty well. And I don't have to do those odd jobs that I assumed I would be doing when I was 26 while I did the audition circuit.
Totally. I mean,
at least I don't this month.
I have a slightly different story in the sense that we
haven't talked really much about you coming up and getting to this point. So where I don't even think we've mentioned we've only
I should probably say what I do and
obliquely mention that you're a bass player.
Oh right.
But I mean you play string bass. And you have done a number of things and played with a number of people. But where what is your background in music, and what has brought you to this point where you've been thinking about all of these issues so deeply and intimately?
So I started playing music fairly early, but my principal instrument very late. I think the main reason they took me is just because there's a spot open and they needed a guy.
It happens.
No. I shouldn't. You know what? I shouldn't say that, because my first year at Rutgers, I wasn't a music major. I got into Rutgers. My parents really didn't want me to do the music thing, so they were try to find something out, anything, but because in their minds they thought it was totally impossible to become a professional musician, unless you were James Brown or something, some really big personality like that. And that's one of the reasons why I started thinking early on so deeply about this, is because at home I had such a big push.
Well, it's I got to show that I can do this.
Yeah, and to top that off, I knew they were wrong, because there was a couple really great musicians who went to my high school, a couple years older than me, and I saw them doing it. And had heard from my music teachers oh yeah, this guy's going on a tour with this person, and I was okay, so I know my family isn't right about this one. The reasons they probably took me, one, I think they needed a guy, And the bigger reason is that during that first year when I wasn't a music major, I took music classes, and I signed up for one of the non-major jazz combos. And because I hadn't been playing bass really that long, I just got beat up at every single one of those rehearsals. The faculty member who was the coach was just like, oh, you got to do this, and you like missed that cue, and you missed the coda, like this isn't the tune. It was just like I was so all over the place. So I wasn't good, but I kept showing up. And I think like if there was one redeeming quality that I had, like it was not that I could operate the equipment that well. It was that I had the grit to like get kicked around a little bit and still keep showing up. Like I wasn't going to quit. Because by that point I was like, no, I'm doing this. So yeah, I get into Mason Gross. I get in with a really great teacher named Mike Richmond, who's the jazz bass teacher there at the time. Also a very well-trained classical bass player. He thought he was going to be on the career track that you described a couple minutes ago. But he was the one who really was like, yeah, we got to get you like playing in the orchestra. It's going to make you a better bass player. You know, it's going to round you out. So because as a person whose life took a lot of turns and who's done all kinds of different gigs, both in like the classical world and the jazz world, he's done a good deal like new music and experimental kinds of things. He's a really open-minded kind of guy. So of course that rubbed off on me. Even at the time, I didn't realize it. But he did a good job of opening me up, and then also teaching me that bass playing is a lot more than just like playing jazz stuff. He's like, and that was always his viewpoint. It's like, oh yeah, you need to do all these different things. That's going to equip you to make a living down the line. You know, so then I finished up there. I took a year off to practice. Then I did a master's degree up at the Hart School. You know, and then I finished up there. That was 3 years ago. I graduated 2013. And then now at that point, I'm just out in the world, right? I'm not going to say the real world because I have a big beef with that term. Again, that's one of the things I put in the book is I don't believe in there being like the college world and the real world. It's all the real world all the time, I promise. It's just a question of when you want to start acknowledging it. But yeah, so I finished college, and then I started trying to find work and trying to dig up some opportunities for myself. The first thing I did is I took maybe 4 or 5 orchestral auditions for the different regional groups. Did better at others, or did better at some than others, you know. So kind of a mixed bag. I got some sub work out of the deal. I didn't win a spot in any of these groups. I got to know a lot of people, which actually was the beginnings of the network that I benefit from now. It's just the act of like, so some of the stuff I put in Make It about like, you know, going and playing for people. Sometimes you call it a lesson, sometimes it's just a hang.
Yeah.
But just like,
you know the differences?
What's that?
You pay for a lesson and you don't pay for a hang.
Well, I've had it go.
I've
had it go both ways with the same person. Where like
that's so funny.
Like what I would always do is if I was ever in doubt, I would ask like, "Hey, would you mind giving me a lesson?" And there was a couple people who, like, I paid them for their time for a few lessons, but played well enough that they were comfortable giving me some work. And then, you know, then I was like, hey, could I play again? And then they were like a little weird about taking money from me.
Right.
Yeah, and then it was like, no, just like, you don't have to pay me, just come over. So like that's when like a couple light bulbs went off. I was like, oh, this is how we meet people.
Yeah.
Like, which to some people listening to this, they're going to be like, well, duh, like, come on. For whatever reason, it was a little bit of a mystery to me. And, but once I started doing that and just like, I think the bottom line is you just need to go and play for lots and lots of people in whatever context that is, whether that's a lesson or like a hangout or like I've had some of my bass player friends who were more jazz dudes come over and just be like, hey, do you mind if I pick your brain about like the Arco stuff? You have that more together than I do. And I'm like, yeah, make coffee and, you know, get lunch after, it'll be a good day.
Yeah.
So that was like the beginnings of it, is taking these couple auditions, because the process, even though the auditions like themselves, like I didn't win, I lost, but the process of preparing for them and going and playing for people and making phone calls and like that whole jam, like that is actually what ended up leading to some work coming my way.
Right.
And then, but to be perfectly clear, at this point, I didn't have enough playing work to support myself, right? I was teaching a lot of lessons. I was teaching guitar lessons to people, doing that kind of thing, just like around Jersey. And, like that was okay for a little while. I was glad to have the work. And,
right.
And then the other thing I did was I started a little video business. It actually the beginnings of it were when I was still in graduate school. But I was just like, well, like since my future wasn't super clear and I didn't have any like pay the rent work lined up in school, and also I saw a need. That was the other big thing.
Yeah.
Is like, and I grew up playing around with a lot of recording equipment, and I tried to start a recording studio in college. That was like a terrible failure. But from doing all that, I learned enough, where I could go grab a camera and have the confidence to say like, okay, I think I can figure this out.
Right.
So this little video business that I started at heart, just recording recitals for people, because booking a video guy through the school was a big pain. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I know about this. I got my hands on a camera. I think I can really help out a lot of people, just by making this process easier. Because rather than having to go through the office and like fill out a form and like submit this to that, and it was like, dude, just shoot me a message, tell me when. It costs this much. Like, let's do this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I filmed a lot of recitals. I did DVDs and stuff for people while I was in school, and then I just kept going once I moved back to New Jersey from Connecticut. And like that was at one point, like that first year and a half, I'd say, was like, it was maybe 50-50. I was doing some playing, I was doing some teaching on the music side. And then the video thing was paying the bills for the rest of it.
Yeah.
And the video thing, I'm glad I did it, because I learned a lot about
there's like
that whole world.
And there, even though that might not be how you want to make a significant chunk of your income, but at the same time, like, it's better to be doing something like that where you're still around musicians and you're doing stuff in an artistic way. Like, maybe it's not what you want as your end goal, but it's better to be doing that than it is to be, at least, than it is to be like temping.
Well, here's the thing though. Like, when I was at Heart recording recitals, it was great because it helped me meet a lot of people within the school. That's like exactly what you're saying. I was around musicians. I was getting paid a couple bucks to record like very good recitals. The level of playing there was good. So I got hip to a lot of music I didn't know about, and it was like really good for the artistic thing. Once I moved back to Jersey, there wasn't as much of that, right? Because I didn't have like the convenience of a music school just like feeding me video gigs like all day long at the end of each semester. So that was good for me, just because it put me in all these situations that I would never have been in otherwise. Like, I can't tell you how many lacrosse games I filmed.
Seriously? Oh,
God. How many mixed martial arts matches? Dude, I can't tell. Like, that's a whole other ball game. Like when you're standing in a box bolted to the side of a cage with two men or two women, like, beating the daylights out of each other. And you're standing there with a camera just like, how did I get here? Like, but I'm glad I did it, because seeing how that production workflow worked and seeing how like a live stream with like a 3-camera live stream works, I learned a ton about that, and that's totally relevant to what musicians need to do to promote themselves now. Like, you need, like, knowing how to use streaming software will put you at an advantage.
Using how to use streaming software outside of Ustream.
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of the streams we did were through Ustream.
And like you said just briefly, is these things, all these things that you're learning how to do and figuring out, are things that might not have meant anything to a musician 20 years ago, but now, as more and more musicians are forced to like function as their own individual companies, like either you learn how to do it yourself or you pay someone else to do it. Like, I mean,
No, not or. It's when you can afford to.
Yeah.
You do everything yourself for a while, and then when you can afford to pay somebody else to do it.
yeah, like you
that's how it
have
works,
like
right.
you can't just function. I mean, like you mentioned, you know, like these new music communities, they have to have people filming their stuff, or else like and figuring out how to promote it, or else no one else is going to hear it. Like, and the point is, when you're doing new music, is to have someone else hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like you look at how people find out about stuff.
Yeah, it's
like, yeah, people, they pick up their phone in the morning and they swipe and they look at what pops up, right?
Yep. How did you like go from like this kind of trying to figure out your own career into you're looking at how you're trying to build your career, and you're like, well, other people are having the same, there's no way other people aren't having the same issues. So
Yeah. Well,
let's put this together.
Yeah, well, where that came from is, like I said, after, like, I was doing the video thing kind of half the time, and then doing more music stuff the other half the time. And then I had a wonderful opportunity come my way. And that's something that I emphasize in the book, is that if you just hang in there, stay on top of your game, you know, keep working to get better as a player, keep meeting people, keep just like always be trying to claw another inch forward to grow. Eventually you're going to get lucky. Something good is just going to happen.
Something will break. It's the thing is, if you're going about things the right way, you will get a break at some point, but the important thing is, have you put in the work to where when that break comes, like when that crack in the door comes, you grab it and you just kick through it. Like,
yeah, you got to be ready.
Because there's people who, you know, occasionally, even in orchestral situations, like, so there's been lots of people who got their break, and when their break came, they weren't ready for it. Like, the break never came back around.
Yeah, so like that's one thing. That's one thing I think is a good belief to internalize, is like just have some faith that eventually, if you stay on the hustle and you're meeting the right people, you know, or trying to, and just doing all these things, a lot of which I talk about in the book, eventually you're going to get lucky. Something's just going to come your way. And as you said, if you're ready for it, you're going to be able to make something of that opportunity. In my case, I decided, I was like, let me audition for some festivals. I want to go, and I'm not trying to go back to school again, but I think just doing a couple festivals for the next time or two would be a good thing to do. The Hail Mary Pass is the one that took me.
That's the one that hit.
Yeah, so I got into the Lucerne Festival in Switzerland, which is an amazing place, because it's it's a festival that puts together an academy orchestra, but they have a big focus on contemporary music. Mm-hmm. While I was at the Lucerne Festival, they had an audition for this young performance project for their alumni. So I auditioned for that, and I got a spot in the ensemble for the project. Mm-hmm. that took place over the next year and a half or year, whatever it was. And that was another experience that opened up my eyes to what's possible out there. Because if you told me in graduate school that, yeah, in about a year and a half, like your big moneymaker in 2015, 2016, your big moneymaker project is going to be one with a free improv audition, I would have laughed in your face and walked away, right? But that's what the audition was. You know, we're there in Switzerland. We went up to a room with the composer and some of the festival people. They put us in pairs, and they said, we want you to go in and just play. Just improvise. Don't play a piece. Don't do, I take that back. I'm not sure if they told us explicitly not to play a piece, but they said, we want you to just play. They were really non-specific. So then I get handed this awesome opportunity to work with a composer from the MIT Media Lab, and it's Todd McElroy, if you're curious. So I was working with him and some of his guys from the Media Lab, We premiered the piece in Lucerne, and then this spring I just got done doing some tour dates around Switzerland where we did the show, and it was just like a great opportunity, top to bottom. I learned again, like I'm not going to say it was completely like smooth and smooth and seamless. There was like definitely, because we're creating something with the composer, there was like, a lot of times where we would bump heads and we're like, oh, we're going to do this, but at the end of the process, I think we did a really cool thing. And the reason I think that is because I saw the looks on people's faces when we went to go and play it.
Yeah.
But as far as my career, going back to that, once the Lucerne thing happened, and then this young performance project, the young performance project was called Fence-A-Dance, just to clarify. Once that all happened and people back home saw I was doing this stuff, mm-hmm. then I started getting just a lot more calls for work.
Yeah.
And then also around this time, I started a bass duo. We did some recordings. We got some stuff up on YouTube. So my buddy Dan Merriman and I were doing that alongside all of this. So that all together started to put an image together that people noticed.
Yeah.
And they would say, oh, hey, yeah, I saw your thing on Facebook, or I saw you in Switzerland, or I saw and then it just got my name to pop up more often in front of people who needed a guy.
Yeah.
And then it's one of these things where once you get some momentum, like getting the ball rolling is really the hardest part. And then another one of the inspirations for the book is there aren't a lot of resources around for how to actually do that as like a 20-something, like a young 20-something person coming out of college with like a lot of blank white spaces on your calendar and you don't know what to do about it. So like it's something that it kept coming up over and over again when I would go and play at a music school or talk to some of my friends who were in school, and hear their worries.
Yeah.
And it just, so it wasn't like I woke up and I was like, I have to do a book. I'm like really killing it out there. I really need to. It was like, I kept hearing about enough people having these problems. Like, it's like, I don't know how to do this, or, oh, wow, you seem to be doing really well. Like, how did you get that? And there was enough little pushes where I was like, I think people could really get something out of this. And at no point, like, I'm not at the top of the mountain by a long shot. I think I still have a long way to go.
Of course. Well, I mean,
and like you said, we're both young dudes at the end of the day.
And I brought this up in a interview I did last week, but like, there's someone was interviewing Casals when he was in his 80s, and they're just like, "Why are you still practicing?" And he's like, "Well, I think I'm finally getting somewhere."
Yeah.
Like, so if that dude was still like, I'm not at the top of my game, or as I'm not where I could be when he was at the end of one of the most celebrated careers in history.
Yeah.
Like, as a 26, 27, 28-year-old, like, of course, like, you, no matter how much success you get, you can always be fucking doing something else.
Oh, that's part of
better,
the,
and that's the most, that's
one
of the most exciting things.
Yeah, to discover something and be like, whoa, I finally got, this is doing what I wanted to do. Like, this was whether it's like, oh, I just need to focus on this finger or this bow stroke at that. All those little discoveries are what make it fun and fulfilling.
Right. So the book, it's called Make It, but the subtitle being a guide for recent music graduates. Mm-hmm. Now, for this book, you're drawing from your own experience, but you're also like talking to other people about what has worked for them, right?
That's how I worked a lot of it out myself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like, how long did you spend like putting this together?
Well, you figure it's probably
in between gigs.
Yeah, it's like 2.5 to 3 years of research, and not that I was like sitting in a library. I was out there doing
Your library was
that was my research, right?
Your library was or a break, but
Yeah.
a break in a rehearsal, or
Well, once I decided it was something I wanted to do, I tried to write it like 2 or 3 times, and then just like looked at all of it and I was like, this is trash. I just hit delete, like, or I like some of it I filed away and used fragments, you know. So I did that, and I was like, I don't know if I have this in me. And then I decided last summer I went and had some pictures taken with another Divergent Paths guests, the one and only Alex Carhaca, right?
Yes,
Good friend, photographer, and clarinetist at large.
the delightful Alexander. Graham.
Yeah, he's a good friend. But I went and had some pictures taken with him, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this new website, and I got to really tighten it up. Mine is looking like not so pro right now. And he was like, oh yeah. So he gave me a bunch of good ideas, and I told him what I wanted out of the pictures. We worked together. I do this new website, and as part of it, I was like, I think I want to, just to see if I have this book thing in me, I want to sit there and just make a commitment to blog like once or twice a week about these things, rather than, because it lowered the ask, which made it easier to do, rather than be like, I'm going to sit down and write a book. Like,
no, I'm going to write a couple times a week, maybe 2,000 words. You know.
Usually when I would sit down, it would come in around like 1,200 to 1,500 words.
Okay.
And 2,000 would be like a longer one, right? But I was just like, okay, like sometime before Wednesday, I'm going to get a blog article out there. And they're still on my website now. You can go look at them. If you go to the archive and look at the earlier ones, those articles were the beginnings of what turned into the book. And you can see like there's problems with them. They're not really, if you compare it to my more recent articles, they're not really written in the same style. Because I was more like a personal thing. Like, let's just see if I can do this.
Right.
And so then after like, a couple months of that, I was like, okay, I think I have this in me. And then, because I had a lot of material to start with, and then I had some free time with this traveling and all that, I put the book together like the end of 2015. It'd be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and bang something out, for 3 hours before I have to pack up and go somewhere.
Yeah.
So then I announced the book, I believe, in February when the raw draft was there. And then from February, for the next probably 2 months, then I was just editing like a fiend and trying to make some connections with people and, get the ball rolling for like the push that comes once it finally is out there, which it is. And then like, that was basically the timeline. It was like maybe half a year, like a little less than half a year, let's say, start to finish, of actually like writing the thing,
right,
and getting it edited and like doing the cover and the mock-up and figuring out the e-commerce software I would need to sell it and like all that noise. So yeah, it came together relatively quickly, all things considered. Part of it was because I was just self-publishing. I was doing it all on my own. And again, that was something I just wanted to do. I had a lot of people ask me like, well, why didn't you get a publisher? And I was like, well, it's like, you got to go and it's like, it starts to like have the same lack of appeal that like taking auditions does.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, you have to like go to all these people and make a pitch and have them say no. And
or you can do it yourself.
And I was like, or I could just do it through the magic of the internet and put it out there. And
maybe if there's a next book, maybe then like you can go and like be like, this is what I did and it sold this amount.
Yeah.
And and in some ways, like doing it yourself, like looks better if it, if you have a good product, if you're working with a good product, sometimes doing it yourself first before trying to get someone else to do it for you looks good. It's just because you did all the work yourself. Like, and
I didn't do everything myself.
Well,
it's like you do need help. Like I'm not an artist. I needed help with like the graphic design.
Yeah.
Side. I needed help editing all that.
I'm not saying that no one does anything like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
rare for people to do anything like completely with zero help from anyone else. And in like a situation with a book, that would be stupid because you have to get other people's opinions on. You can't if you just put something out when no one else has eyeballs on it. There's going to be stuff that you overlooked. But
of course, right.
But I mean, you know,
Right.
like the production and the marketing. Like, I mean, you're not doing it with help from a large overarching
No.
interest.
But again, that's just something at this point. I was like, I want to be pretty hands-on with that kind of stuff because I need to learn about it. And the other thing about knowing a little bit when it comes to some of these other skills is like in the context of a website. If you need to move a picture over by 10 pixels, it's a lot easier if you can just get in there and do it yourself sometimes rather than have to pay somebody $50 and wait a day for that to happen.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I think it's good to be hands-on, at least at first. Just like learn something about it. You know, it's only going to help you. And that applies to a lot of different things, whether it comes to like promoting yourself or like how to run a good YouTube channel for yourself.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're like doing a promotional, like you're doing a promotional push for the book, and you're kind of like taking it out on the road.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with that?
Basically, my strategy there is I had a lot of personal friends who were interested, right? So this week I've been in touch with a lot of them, just shooting them emails or Facebook messages and stuff and saying like, hey, you know, it's here. You know, just putting it out there, like no pressure or anything. You know, because I really think that it speaks for itself and the people who want it will get it. So I'm not into like the hard sell at all. I'm just trying to spread the word, man. Like just trying to help some people out. And from doing that, several people bought it and got back to me and had good things to say, and awesome. That makes me really happy. And then the next step is I'm going to go to some of these institutions where I know people and they know me, and like my old schools that I went to, and some of these summer festivals, and just make a little pitch for them. Say, hey, here's what it is. You know, here's what it's trying to fix and who it's trying to help. And if you think that is something you want in your community and that's going to benefit you, you know, tell them about it. I'll give you everything you need to do to make it easy on you. And I think we'll both, not both, but the three groups of people, you know, both me, the person I'm contacting, and the group that they're pushing it to, everybody will get something out of that.
Yeah.
It's a win-win-win for everybody, right? So that's the next thing that I'm gonna do. I'm playing around a little bit with like paid advertising and that kind of thing. A lot of what good networking isn't like shoving stuff in front of somebody's face, or like good promotion isn't shoving it in front of people's face. Again, I talk about it in the book. The example of the guy who comes up to you on the gig and just like immediately forces a business card down your throat. Yeah. Like, call me, play. And I'm just like, oh, God, really, man? Like, I've had this happen where it's usually somebody young and they were told that that's what networking is in their one career class that the conservatory offered. Yeah. Right. And that's not what it's about. I think good networking and good promotion is more based on relationships.
Of course, it always has been.
Right? So it's like the business card is there for like when the relationship is already there, and you say, hey, this is just to make, you know, calling me a little bit easier. Yeah. Or like finding me on Facebook a little bit easier.
Or if someone is just like, do you have a card? And then you can be like, you know what? I do.
Yeah, or for example, I found there's a wonderful cellist who I've literally found out about like yesterday because Facebook was like, oh, you might know this person, right? You both went to this school. And so I was like, okay, a art school person, cool. So I like clicked on the thing. And then it turns out this cellist's name is Emily Davidson. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's like, it was like a little spooky because the kind of approach and the kind of entrepreneurship that I advocate, I go on her YouTube page and her website, and I was like, this is it. Yeah. Like, this is awesome. So I shot her a message, and I just said, hey, you know, like, I think you're doing everything really spot on, and we should do something together. So we've been talking a little bit back and forth about what that might look like, and but again, like the emphasis I think is on the relationship.
So, if people want to buy your book,
If they want to buy it,
they don't have to.
No.
But if they want,
if you think, yeah.
Where do they go?
Okay, so eventually it's going to be available all over the place on Amazon and all that stuff. It's not available on Amazon right now.
Working on it.
What's that?
Working on it.
That's part of the strategy. It's just a little bit later on down the line.
Right.
Right now, if you want to get it, it's available in exactly one place, and that's on my website. I'm sure you can include a link for everybody.
I definitely will.
My website is just emilioguarino.com, my name.com, pretty easy.
The last name is Guarino.
You got it, buddy.
Well, I have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Most people can spell Emilio, but the
hey, it's me, Emilio.
exactly. But the U in Guarino might
throw some people.
Anyway, so it's on your website.
It's on my website. There's a tab at the top of the page in the menu called Make It. You click that, and then that'll take you to a page where there's some things I put together, some resources so you can learn a little bit about it, just what kind of people it's for, what you might get out of it, what topics I cover. There's a link where you can check out the table of contents, and then I also have an excerpt from the beginning of the book that talks a little bit about, my feelings behind why I put it together, the sorts of problems I want to help fix, and also the gist of how to use the book. It's short on purpose. It's not designed to be this like big tome that takes you 6 months to get through. I wanted it to be something that you could burn through in a couple sittings at most.
Yeah, it's not a textbook. It's
not
just
a textbook.
It's a helpful resource.
It's a guide.
Yeah,
it's a guide for recent music graduates.
Oh, that's funny. That's what it says on the cover.
It's not a long read, and the idea is there's a lot of actionable content. So there's stuff in there that you do. You read it, and then it tells you, or I tell you, to go and do something out in the world. So if you need help networking, like, you're gonna have to go out and talk to some people.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the idea behind it. Is it's an actionable guide. And like I said, you can read a little bit of what that actually looks like in the book right on the website. You can buy it there. You can contact me through the contact page on the site if you have any questions about it. If you already have it and you just want to tell me something, like, you can get in touch with me that way. That contact page just goes straight to my email. So I'm pretty easy to get in touch with.
You can pay with credit card or PayPal. It's great.
Yeah, I take all forms of money.
You can just mail you a 20 and you'll say
yeah, if you want to come and drop a little baggie of gold coins on my doorstep, we can work that out maybe. But it's probably easier if you just use PayPal.
Probably.
No, but so anyway, yeah. That's basically it. It's on my website for now. I'm hoping to have a hardcover or paper. I'm still working out which one it's going to be, but a paper copy, a physical book you can hold for the fall. So that's down the line. I have some other ideas down the line for other books that I might want to do. So that world might be expanding for me. I'm going to take that one day at a time. Get through this book. And yeah, so like I said, if you're interested, it's on emilioguarino.com.
Well, awesome.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much
fun.
for sitting down. This was good times.